Happy Devil's Thursday. This is At The Point. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with Bruce Zeman, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Coming to you live from American Whiskey before the Devils take on the Los Angeles Kings tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern start. Hello, Bruce. How are you feeling today?
Sam, I am having a great Thursday, and it looks like you were having a great Thursday as we got ready to do the show today. You were having some delicious-looking pizza there, and boy, I wish I was with you.
Margarita pizza. They actually, here at American Whiskey, they have one of these brick oven type contraption, and they take advantage of it. They make fresh pizza, any kind of custom pizza you want. I elected the margarita pizza, something simple. Sometimes I go with the meat lovers pizza with pepperoni and sausage and sprinkle some onions and peppers. Or as what some people say, the Sam pizza, which is basically a pizza with a salad on top of it. But, you know, don't want to discuss you with that, Bruce.
Now, listen, at least the premise of being healthy with the pizza is there. That's the important thing.
You want to know something wild? So,
sure.
Last podcast, which was a great podcast, by the way. Our last podcast, I went to the game. After we did that Game Day Live, I went to the game. I had tickets in the club section, so which comes with the buffet. What I didn't realize was it was unlimited prime rib. And I ate a lot of prime rib, Bruce. And I put pictures out on social media. People have been commenting on it. I mean, I went many rounds with that prime rib. I literally did not eat from that night with maybe a couple, like, crackers here and there and whatnot, and maybe a tuna fish sandwich. But I barely ate between Tuesday night to now. And having that pizza, you saw how fast I was eating because I was so full of eating all that prime rib on Tuesday night, and now it's Thursday night.
Well, it sure looked good.
Yeah.
And at some point, I'm going to get down there with you at American Whiskey, and we're going to try some of that food together and talk a little hockey. But, you know, as we get closer and closer to the Christmas holiday, there is a lot of stuff going on in the NHL, and I'm going to talk about some of those things today on the show.
Yeah, and, you know, one thing that I like to talk about, and they're already talking about it in the YouTube Live right now, is about, well, the Nashville Predators. Are they done? How are they going to turn it around if they're not? Because right now, I think they're 7-16. I think that's a record right now, something of that nature. They're below 500, even for NHL 500 standards. They're below. And they were expected to be the team after a major offseason. But right now, they're not getting results. And are you going to hit the panic button right now if you're a Nashville Predators fan?
I don't know if they're going to hit the panic button yet, but they're getting to the point where they've got to decide if they're going to retool for this season. They're going to say this is just not our year, and they're going to move some stuff around. But they are not only not having a good year, they've got the worst record in the league right now at 7-16-6. And really nothing that they have counted on this year has gone right. Some of the big names that they brought in to jumpstart this team and to do some big things this season, it just hasn't really worked out. Their big acquisition, Steven Stamkos, who's been a consistent producer all of his career, 29 games, 7 goals, 7 assists for 14 points. Their goaltending has not been good. UC Saros, who got a big contract, is tied for the league lead with 13 losses. Although, as you and I were discussing off air, he's still got almost a 91 save percentage and a goals against average of 90.8, which is not terrible, but very soon they're going to have to decide if they're going to just pack this season in and say this just isn't our year, or they're going to do something significant. But the thing is, Sam, is they don't really have a lot of pieces to move.
Yeah, I mean, you would figure that Stamkos signing would have worked out wonders for them. And I understand that sometimes you sign a big free agent like Steven Stamkos, that it does take a little time, but time is running out right now. And the biggest disappointment, I get it, his numbers aren't that bad, Saros, but when you get paid that much, you've got to be a difference maker. You can't just be average. And I think that's where fans are getting disappointed. I'm not saying it's all on Saros, but I would have expected more. He had a heck of a season last year. There were opportunities to trade him. Instead, they traded the young prospect away, Askarov. And, right now they're sticking to their guns with Saros, but something's got to give in Nashville. And what is Barry Trotz going to do? I mean, you said it, Bruce. Not many pieces to move. I mean, I think it's either boom or bust. I can't see them doing anything more than what they have.
Well, they don't have a lot of options. I mean, you've got some big names, and without looking at everything right in front of me here, you've got to look at who's got trade protection. And who they have that people are going to want. There's been a lot of scuttlebutt in the media about whether or not the Predators are going to make a coaching change. But again, last year, Andrew Brunette did a great job with Nashville. And does this fall on him? It's a very tough decision. I mean, if you look at some of the other coaching changes that have gone on this year, I mean, you look at what happened up in Boston. Now, they made that change up there, and that seems to have jump-started the Bruins. And then again, you also look at what happened to Luke Richardson in Chicago, which is one that a lot of people really didn't see, although a lot of people expected Chicago to be better. I mean, at some point, Barry Trotz is going to have to act. And unfortunately, I think the next step for the Predators may be a coaching change, even though it could potentially be an overreaction.
Wow. I mean, didn't Andrew Brunette, he has a great track record in the last 3-4 years to actually let him go, but who would you replace Andrew Brunette with?
Well, I mean, that's another topic for conversation. I think depending on the team, we talked about some of the names out there, and there's one big name out there that comes with, if we're being honest, comes with some baggage, but potentially Joel Quenneville, somebody that has won 3 Stanley Cups, can turn a team around in midseason. I mean, really, if we're being honest, we had talked about in a previous podcast what the factors would have to be for him to come back in the league, and to me anyway, if you're looking to salvage the season, this may be that big move where the team says, look, there's going to be some blowback from doing this, but if we're not going to give up on the season, because I don't think you can go in there with a coach that doesn't have a proven track record if you're going to make that change. I'm not sure that doing that is really the right move, but if you look at just what they've done so far, Sam, really nothing has worked. Their leading scorer is Roman Josi, who's a defenseman, by the way. 23 points in 29 games. But to me, one of the other things, it's a little misleading sometimes, but if you look at, the players plus minus, Josi is a negative 21, which is definitely not good. So that's a tough question, but I think that the Predators are definitely running out of runway.
Definitely. I mean, they can come back. We've seen it happen. If you remember the St. Louis Blues about 5 years ago, were the worst team in the NHL, and then made a heck of a run, and then went up and won the Stanley Cup. I think it might need a coaching. They may need a coaching change in Nashville. I like Andrew Brunette, but right now a lot is on the line. Excuse me, and he may not be the right coach at this moment for the team. They were supposed to be in a win now mentality. Right now, they need to survive right now. And if you're going to salvage this team, that's the only really big move you can make without actually having to make a trade. to get things jump started.
Yeah, I mean, they're 13 points out of a wild card position right now, and that's a lot of points. I mean, that's potentially 6 or 7 wins, throwing in some ties there potentially, but they've got some ground that they've got to make up, and they have had a tremendously disappointing season, and one of the other teams, because when I was preparing for this, they talked about some teams that were expected to do some other things. A team that's in a similar situation. I didn't have this on our sheet to talk about today, but I was looking at this when I was getting ready for the show today. The Buffalo Sabres. They brought in Lindy Ruff again to try to get the ship there, and they're 11-14-4. They've got a whole bunch of losses in a row. So, it's a win now business, and boy, Barry Trotz is getting pushed into a corner here, and he doesn't have a lot of moves to rectify his situation.
No, he does not. And it's hard to make a big splash when you don't have the pieces to do it. And speaking of big splash, there are other teams that are probably going to be making a big splash at the NHL trade deadline. But also they could be making a big splash even now. I mean, I thought it was pretty significant the other night when Jacob Trouba was traded to the Anaheim Ducks. I think it served well for both teams. Anaheim gets that player that they've always wanted. You pair him up, with Gudas, you could have a really, really nasty pairing on the blue line. But also, the addition by subtraction, it allowed the Rangers to re-sign or extend Shesterkin to an 8-year long-term deal, giving him the money that he wanted. So it helped both teams. It was kind of like mutually beneficial. But what other teams do you think are going to be making some big moves, maybe at the trade deadline or even leading to the trade deadline?
That's a great question, Sam. And there are a couple teams that I've been following that I think are going to do some things at the trade deadline. One of the teams I think that may do something at the trade deadline is the New York Rangers. Chris Drury has made it known that the team is open for business. I think this is a very important part of the evolution of the franchise. They moved out Jacob Trouba. They freed up that money. They're looking for a leadership change. And I think the Rangers could potentially make a splash by looking to add some offense or maybe move Chris Kreider. Has been rumored to be on the trade block. We'll see if that happens. Another team that I think may look to add some pieces may be the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is kind of the feel-good story of the league, one of the feel-good stories of the league. And we saw the other night, Sam, just how good their goaltending is when Anthony Stolar stood on his head against New Jersey. I think they were outshot by the Devils 39-16, and they came away with a 2-1 overtime win. And you and I both follow the social media boards and everything, and there is a lot of frustration from Devils fans because he just stood on his head, Stolarz, and the Devils didn't really play all that well defensively. We had some turnovers, we had a goal or perhaps that we would like back, but the Rangers and Maple Leafs are two teams that I've been watching potentially that could make some big noise come trade deadline time. And again, the Devils are also another team that could make something. I mean, their GM Tom Fitzgerald has been said that he's looking for some depth pieces, but I still continue to think that they need kind of a more of an abrasive forward. Who I would love to add if I can get him to come out of retirement, even though he's older now? I would love the Devils to go after a player like Claude Lemieux if he was still in his prime and everything. But I think they could use like a Pat Maroon type player as they go towards the playoffs. But I think the Rangers and Maple Leafs are two of the teams that I'm working on and I'm watching. And I also, when it comes to the Rangers, not only during this season, but I think they may also do some big stuff in the offseason because there's some players that may become available next year. And one of the players that I have heard from some of the sources I talked to that is on the Rangers' radar is Jack Eichel of the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, Jack Eichel. You think he's going to be traded?
Well, I don't know if he'll be traded. All I'm saying is that depending on what the Rangers could potentially offer the Knights, I mean, anybody's tradable, right? If Wayne Gretzky can get traded, anybody can get traded. Jack Eichel, for what the Rangers are trying to do, he's a proven playoff performer. He can score. He's won a Stanley Cup, and that's something that they could definitely use. So I think that he's definitely on their radar, and we'll just see. I mean, all the teams in the league would like to have a player like Jack Eichel, and I mean, imagine how bad Buffalo must feel that didn't work out there, and now he's, he went to Vegas, he won a cup, and he's really doing all the right things there.
Yeah, definitely. You know what? We all talk about, like, the teams that are playoff bound or trying to get positioning in the playoffs, making the splash. But something tells me that the San Jose Sharks are not done, and they're going to make a big splash as well. They do have pieces. They do have pieces to trade to kind of better their rebuild. And watch out for that, because something tells me they're up to something. They did trade Mackenzie Blackwood away, and I think the Sharks are going to help another playoff-bound team. I'm kind of interested to see what kind of blockbuster it would be. Draft picks, first-rounders, possibly. Maybe they'll be asking a lot. I don't know if they have those type of pieces, but sometimes teams get desperate on trade deadline, and the Sharks are ready to pounce on that.
And you make a good point, Sam, too, because their GM Mike Greer has done a really good job kind of rebuilding that franchise. They've made a bunch of trades. They've moved some salary. They've revamped their goaltending, and they very well could make some moves, whether it's draft picks or to get a name to look forward. I think one of the players that the Sharks have that a lot of teams will be interested in, if they decide to make him available, that's a big if, is Tyler Toffoli, who is on the Devils. He's a great player, and I think some teams will be interested in him. Another team that I'm watching because they've made some significant changes too is the Colorado Avalanche. They've basically completely revamped their goaltending, and we'll see what they're going to do.
Yeah. You know what? It should be interesting. What I love is all the captologists on NHL trade deadline trying to figure things out. You know who's going where, how do you move money around? And that's always interesting to me, how they do things on NHL trade deadline. Moving on, Bruce, the next topic is the goaltending. Who's got the best goaltending in the league right now? Who do you think is going to win the Jennings?
Great question, Sam. If you look at the top 5 teams in the league right now, you've got Minnesota, you've got Winnipeg, the Kings, Dallas, Toronto, and New Jersey. That's the top 6. And on all of those teams, you've got like the guy and you've got a strong backup. Minnesota, you got Gustafsson. Winnipeg, you've got Connor Hellebuck. And then you've got, Ottinger in Dallas. You've got Stolars in Toronto. And then if you look at what you've got going on out west, it figures that right as we're talking about this, my computer just shuts on me, so I have to just look up my notes here.
I hate when that happens.
You've got Darcy Kemper. But if you're talking about like truly probably the best tandem, one where there's just not one guy, I think maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're 5th in the league right now. They're 17-9-2. And they've got Stolars and they've got Joseph Wall. And they're really being talked about as potentially having one of the best tandems in the league.
Yeah.
They've really been, I wouldn't say that they're a surprise, because I think that they thought they were going to be good this year, but really what they've done, I mean, and I know we're talking about goaltending here, but boy, Mitch Marner is certainly setting himself up for a huge payday if he stays in Toronto with the way he's played during the regular season.
Yeah. You know what? Toronto's looking good with their goalies. New Jersey Devils. Jake Allen is out right now, but that's why they have depth. Now they're going to go with Markstrom tonight. He's in the starter's net, as far as I know, during practice. Other tandems, what do you think, Bobrovsky and Knight?
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly worth discussing. I mean, they're the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers, so they're always going to be in the conversation. But interestingly enough, if you look at the rankings from 1 to 31, believe it or not, you know that the Panthers come in at number 23. Really? I mean, they're 18-9-2, and I'm just pulling up their stats right here. So if you look at Bobrovsky, you've got Bobrovsky coming in at 13-5-1, and then Spencer Knight at 5-4-1. Not terrible, but not setting the league on fire. I'm just looking up with the numbers here. Their goals against average as a team is 3.17, which is, 3/4 of a goal higher than the Minnesota Wild. It comes in at 2.39. So, I mean, but if you look at what the Panthers did last year, I mean, it's all about what happens in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, but also I think having a tandem is equally as important because of helping the other goaltender. Because during the regular season, it takes a lot of wear and tear off your main goaltender, even though you're at a 1A, 1B scenario. Going into the playoffs, if you've only played, 45, 50 games versus nearing 70, it makes a world of a difference down the stretch during the playoffs. So, that's what I look for. I thought the Ottinger and I think Wedgwood last season was a great tandem. And Ottinger, I thought he played well. I thought he played well enough to be considered, Stanley Cup contender worthy, the way he played. I mean, he went against some big teams like the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, that kind of firepower, it's hard to stop.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, when we talk about goaltending, you look at some of the teams that we've discussed earlier in the season about goaltending being a concern. Now, last year, if we take a look at the Edmonton Oilers for a minute, that was something that they were really worried about because were they good enough to carry them to a championship? And, they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. But it was always a question mark as to whether that was going to be their Achilles heel. And right now they're ranked 8th in the league. Their record right now is 16-10-2. Their team goals against averages just under 3, 2.86. But they've gotten the goaltending this year that they need to make some noise. I mean, you got Calvin Pickard and Stuart Skinner both doing a pretty decent job. And come playoff time, goaltending is everything. So that's definitely something worth watching because it's such an integral part of what makes a team a Stanley Cup champion.
Oh, yeah. And we saw last couple years, but they had to split. Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark, just being that ultimate tandem. I mean, they had chemistry. They liked each other. They always encouraged each other. It's hard to have a number one goaltender when the other goaltender is just as good. I think it did wonders for the Bruins a couple years ago where they broke the NHL record. So, again, having great goaltending and having two great goaltenders is a happy problem for any GM. It's not about winning the Jennings Trophy, but really you're going to have a balance and have that insurance policy down the stretch, especially to having a bona fide number one goaltender to help your team win.
Yeah, and you make a good point, Sam, about the goaltending, because something else that comes up a lot with goaltending in the league is the relationship that the goalies have. You're right, Swayman and Linus Ullmark, that was fantastic. I mean, probably the league's best tandem. But if you if you know anything about hockey, you know that if you go back over the years, some of the relationships on some teams between the 1A and 1B has not really been all that warm and fuzzy. I mean, if you ask anybody about Ed Belfour, how he used to be with some of his partners, it was not all warm and fuzzy. And while I understand the competitive fire and everything, what the Bruins did really worked. Yeah. And, I mean, it didn't get them to the promised land because of that little bump against Florida. But, I mean, it was something that was definitely the team's strong point and allowed them to eventually move Ullmark to Ottawa, which has certainly worked out for Ottawa.
Yeah, I mean, times have changed. I mean, we've heard of stories, even the Canadian Olympic team, where Patrick Roy was the number one goaltender and Martin Brodeur was just an afterthought. And there was a lot of resentment the way Roy treated Brodeur on that Canadian Olympic team. But years later, when Marty was going for his 552nd win, Patrick Roy was one of the first people there, and he actually had to explain to him and apologize. You know, that was strictly competitive fire, and, you know, it's water and bridge right now. But in today's NHL, you need to have your goalies on the same page and supporting each other, because the game is way too fast than what it used to be, and you have to be extremely athletic and big to mind that net.
And goaltending is such a big part of the fabric of a team. I think that having a pair of guys that are in sync and that can, you know, do the job and support each other, I think it's really important. But we saw, you know, how goaltending can affect the team. I mean, the other night, the game against the Maple Leafs was a great game. I mean, Stolarz actually stood on his head. It was a great game for Toronto. And listen, you got to give them credit because they played well. They get outshot significantly, and they managed to win that game. But then again, if we go back to last year, you can see how goaltending can also potentially be an Achilles heel, because if you look at the Stanley Cup final, Sergei Bobrovsky did not have a couple of good games in the final. And, you know, for the Panthers' sake, they came back and won that. But that could have ended real badly if they didn't have a good Game 7.
Yeah, definitely, Bruce. All right, let's switch gears right now. We're going to talk a little Devils hockey like we always do at the end of the podcast. This place is starting to fill up, Bruce, here at American Whiskey. Everybody's drinking, eating, all sorts of shenanigans going on here. And it's only, 5:32 p.m. Eastern for a 7 o'clock game. Probably in the next 20 minutes, it's going to be a madhouse before we start Game Day Live. But, Bruce, who's on your Christmas list? If you're a Devils fan, who you want to improve the team?
Well, I have two things on my Christmas list for New Jersey, and I alluded to one of these before. I would love to see the Devils get a forward with a little bit of bite. I would love to add a Pat Maroon-type player, a player with some bite like a Tom Wilson. You know, both of those players are probably not coming here, but it would be nice to see that type of player in the mix. I mean, the team definitely has some more physicality this year than they've had in the past, so I'm happy with that. But two things I would like from Santa, if I'm a Devils fan. I'd like that abrasive forward, and for goodness sake, I would just like a little bit more consistency from having a fantastic game one night and then the next night or the night after just being totally flat.
Yeah. You know what? I would like the Devils and Santa to bring someone that's crazy and eccentric, but will fight for his teammates. And there are not many of them around. I mean, a lot of them are fan favorites. You got the Matt Rempe's of the world, the Tom Wilsons of the world. But maybe that's a little bit over the top. Maybe like a Kyle Clutterbuck type player. Gritty, can fortify your bottom six, but can also score goals like Stefan Nason has throughout this NHL season. But that's the kind of player I would like in terms of goaltending and defense. I think they're there. They have the depth. But it wouldn't hurt for the Devils to get a nice, stay-at-home, reliable defenseman as depth going into the playoffs, if they shall make it.
I mean, if I could turn back the clock, someone I would add right now, and anybody that knows me or has followed me over the years knows that Marty and Scott Stevens have always been my two favorite Devils. I mean, I love Dan, I love all those guys, but Scott Stevens has always been my favorite player, even from when I was a little kid. But you know who my second favorite Devil of all time is?
Who?
Want to take a guess?
Claude Lemieux?
Pepe was up there, but the second Devils player that I came to like almost immediately, and I thought he was such an inspiration, and I'd love to have him back in his prime, was Brian Boyle.
Oh, yeah. He would be great.
I loved that guy. I thought he was such an inspiration to the team. He could play, and he could stand up for his teammates, and I actually went to a couple of games. I had the honor of meeting him at one point, and just such a nice guy.
Yeah, he was always a fan favorite and always will be, especially with his fight with cancer, and then the story that happened with his little boy, I believe, that luckily had a miracle diagnosis of AVM, which, by the way, not to disclose my medical information, I actually had that as well. I had a cancer scare like no other when I went to surgery, and I asked, like, is it a tumor? Is it cancerous? Is it this, that? And they're like, you hit the lottery ticket of all diagnoses. You have this thing that's normally found in children. It's called AVM. I think that's the acronym of that, and it's really like a 1 in something million diagnosis, especially finding an adult. And even my doctor at the time said that because they found it in me late in life, that they actually looked through the record books to see, how close I was and possibly breaking that record, believe it or not. That's a little.
I'm just glad you're okay.
Oh yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I could. That's another podcast for another day. Shorts guy knows about it. I'll talk to you later offline, But yeah, he definitely knows about it.
Tell Shorts guy I said hello. I love his antics on the pod on your other show. It's great.
Oh, Bruce says that he loves all your antics on the other shows. He thinks it's great. Yeah. Oh, which is a nice segue and plug. We were going to have Game Day live tonight, live, 6 p.m. Eastern. Myself, Vinny Parisi out in Chicago, and Shorts guy, and we're going to be here at American Whiskey, 51 Edison Place, across the street from Prudential Center next to Championship Plaza. Bruce, I know Santa's going to bring us a Stanley Cup. I think it's going to be possibly in 2025. I know you may not think so, and fans may think maybe that's a little too premature, but I just got this gut feeling that maybe something's going to happen with this New Jersey Devils team that we're going to all love.
Well, you know what, Sam? With Santa, anything is possible.
Oh, of course. Of course. But I hope he brings me a power play goal tonight.
I hope so, too. I hope he brings us a big win because the Kings are a good team.
Yes, they are. As the home stretch continues, can they snap the home woes? We'll have it, Game Day Live, shortly at top of the hour at 6 p.m. Eastern. Bruce, any final thoughts on this wonderful episode 9 of At the Point?
I love doing this show with you, Sam. I think it sounds real good. And we ask people to send us their questions. We'll talk about anything and have fun tonight and go Devils.
Yep. Go Devils. And dropping the podcast in 20 minutes on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and all of our podcast pages. Till next time, let's go Devils.